Every story has a beginning, a mystery waiting to be unraveled, a truth lurking in the shadows. Here at Charlie's Tales, I bring you the strangest, the darkest, and the most unbelievable stories from around the world. Some are terrifying, some are tragic, but all of them will leave you thinking. So sit back, listen closely, and let's dive into today's tale. On a quiet country lane in Essex, England, stood a Victorian mansion that would become known as the most haunted house in England. The Borley Rectory, built in the year 1863, was constructed on the site of an ancient monastery, dating back to the 13th century. The building's Gothic architecture, with its labyrinthine layout, numerous rooms, and shadowy corridors, seemed designed to harbor secrets. And harbor secrets it did for over 7 decades. The first family to occupy the rectory was the Reverend Henry Dawson Ellis Bull and his 14 children. The Bull family moved into the imposing structure in 1863, and it wasn't long before they began experiencing unexplainable phenomena. The family reported hearing inexplicable footsteps echoing through empty hallways, seeing strange lights floating through the gardens at night, and encountering a ghostly nun who appeared to glide across the grounds. This spectral nun would become the most persistent and well-documented apparition associated with the rectory. According to local legend, she was a young novice from the monastery that once stood on the property. The story goes that she fell in love with a monk from the monastery, and the two planned to elope. However, their plan was discovered, and the monk was executed. The heartbroken nun was bricked up alive in the walls of the monastery's cellars as punishment for breaking her vows. The Bull family became accustomed to the ghostly presence, treating it almost as an eccentric housemate. The children would even engage in a macabre game of nun hunting, exploring the grounds after dark in hopes of catching a glimpse of the spectral figure. Reverend Bull maintained a skeptical but open mind about the phenomena, documenting some of the occurrences but never seeking publicity for his haunted home. When Reverend Bull died in 1927, his son Harry became the new rector but stayed only a short time. The rectory then passed to Reverend Guy Eric Smith and his wife in 1928. Unlike the Bulls, the Smiths were immediately disturbed by the strange occurrences. Within months of moving in, they reported a significantly more intense level of paranormal activity than the previous occupants. The Smiths described hearing servants' bells ringing throughout the night, despite the bell system having been disconnected years earlier. They found keys mysteriously displaced, lights turning on and off without explanation, and unexplained cold spots that seemed to move throughout the house. Most disturbingly, Mrs. Smith discovered a brown paper package in a cupboard containing a human skull, a discovery that was never adequately explained. At their wits' end, the Smiths contacted the Society for Psychical Research and also reached out to the newspaper, the Daily Mirror. The paper, sensing a sensational story, dispatched reporter V.C. Wall to investigate. Wall's article about the haunting caught the attention of paranormal investigator Harry Price, who would ultimately become synonymous with the Borley Rectory haunting. Price's first visit to the rectory occurred in June 1929. On this initial visit, he witnessed several phenomena that defied explanation. During a séance, a communicating spirit claimed to be the ghost of a young French nun named Marie Layer, who had been murdered on the site in 1667. The spirit indicated that her body was buried in the cellar. The Smiths, overwhelmed by both the hauntings and the growing publicity, left the rectory in July 1929, less than a year after moving in. They were replaced by the Reverend Lionel Foister and his much younger wife, Mary Ann. It was during the Foysters' residency that the haunting reached its peak intensity. Phenomena reported during the Foysters' tenure included objects being thrown across rooms by unseen forces, windows shattering spontaneously, and furniture being rearranged while people were in the room. Marianne Foyster became the focus of much of the activity. She reported being slapped by invisible hands, knocked out of her bed at night, and even locked in rooms with no explanation. Most intriguing were the mysterious wall writings that began appearing throughout the house. These messages, often addressed directly to Marianne, seemed to be pleas for help or comments about the house. One such message read, "Marianne, please help get." Another said Marianne light mass prayers. The handwriting was crude and childlike, and the messages often appeared while witnesses were present, seemingly materializing out of nowhere. Harry Price continued his investigations throughout the Foysters' residency, documenting over 2,000 alleged paranormal events between 1931 and 1935. Price brought in numerous witnesses, including journalists, psychics, and skeptical researchers. Many left convinced that something inexplicable was occurring at Borley Rectory. The Foysters finally departed in 1935, with Reverend Foyster's health reportedly broken by the strain of living in the haunted house. The rectory remained vacant for 2 years, until Harry Price himself leased it for a year to conduct a more controlled investigation. Price advertised for volunteer researchers who would agree to stay in the house for extended periods, observing and documenting any unusual occurrences. A rotation of 48 investigators participated in what became one of the most extensive paranormal investigations of the time. They employed various methods, including temperature readings, photographic surveillance, and seances. During this period, the researchers reported numerous phenomena, including the appearance of spirit lights, mysterious footsteps, and the strong smell of incense wafting through rooms with no apparent source. One investigator, Sidney Glanville, conducted a planchette session where a spirit claimed to be the ghost of a man named Sunex Amures, who would burn down the rectory at midnight on March 27, 1938, and that the fire would reveal the remains of the murdered nun. In a twist that shocked even the most skeptical observers, on February 27, 1939, almost exactly a year after the prediction, Borley Rectory caught fire. The blaze was started accidentally by the new owner, Captain W.H. Gregson, who was unpacking books when he overturned an oil lamp. The fire spread rapidly, and by morning, the once imposing rectory was a smoldering ruin. The coincidence of the fire with the earlier prediction was difficult to ignore. In 1943, Harry Price returned to the site with a team to excavate the cellar. During the dig, they discovered the jawbone of a young woman, lending credence to the claims that a murdered nun was buried on the property. The bone was given a proper Christian burial, hoping to put the restless spirit to peace. Price published his findings in 2 books, The Most Haunted House in England and The End of Borley Rectory. These works catapulted the Borley haunting into national prominence and established it as one of the most famous ghost stories in British history. However, the story doesn't end with the rectory's destruction. The hauntings reportedly continued on the site of the ruins and in the nearby church. Visitors to the site continued to report seeing the ghostly nun wandering the grounds, hearing mysterious whispering, and feeling sudden cold spots. In 1948, Harry Price died of a heart attack, but his death only intensified interest in the Borley case. In 1956, the Society for Psychical Research published a report that was critical of Price's methods and conclusions, suggesting that many of the phenomena could be explained by natural causes or deliberate hoaxing. This critique focused particularly on Marianne Foyster, suggesting she may have been responsible for some of the physical phenomena, possibly to cover up an affair with a lodger. Others pointed to the possibility that Price himself had fabricated evidence to create a more compelling story. Yet even these skeptical assessments couldn't fully explain all the documented phenomena. The sheer volume of witnesses, many of whom were credible professionals with no apparent motive to lie, makes the Borley Rectory case difficult to dismiss entirely. Louis Meyerling, a theater director who stayed at the rectory in 1937, wrote in his diary, "I have never believed in the supernatural, but after tonight, I cannot deny that there are forces beyond our understanding at work in that house. What I witnessed with my own eyes cannot be explained by any natural law I know." One of the most compelling aspects of the Borley case is the consistency of the reports over many decades and across different occupants. The ghostly nun was seen by members of the Bull family in the 1860s, by the Smiths in 1928, by the Foysters in the 1930s, and by Price's researchers until the building's destruction. This consistency across time and witnesses lends credibility to the accounts. The nearby Borley Church also became associated with paranormal activity. Visitors reported seeing a phantom coach and horses driven by a headless coachman racing up the rectory drive. Others claimed to have seen the ghostly figures of monks walking in silent procession through the churchyard. In 1965, a BBC television crew visited the site to film a segment for a documentary about haunted locations. During filming, multiple crew members reported technical equipment malfunctioning inexplicably, batteries draining rapidly, and unexplained cold spots that would move around the ruins. The producer, James Turner, later stated, "I've filmed in many supposedly haunted locations, but Borley was the only place where I felt something was watching us the entire time." The village of Borley itself became something of a pilgrimage site for ghost hunters and the curious. Local residents reported that on quiet nights, particularly around the anniversary of the fire, strange lights could be seen moving through the empty field where the rectory once stood. Some claimed to hear faint whispers and the sound of a woman crying. In 1992, a group of psychic researchers conducted an overnight vigil at the site. They set up sensitive audio equipment and claimed to have captured EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, of a woman's voice saying what sounded like, "Help me and I'm trapped." While such evidence is often disputed, it added to the mystique surrounding the location. What makes the Borley Rectory case so enduring in paranormal lore is not just the quantity of reported phenomena, but the quality of the documentation. Few haunted locations have been so thoroughly investigated and documented by researchers attempting to apply scientific methods to supernatural claims. The case exists in a gray area between provable fact and pure fiction, which perhaps explains its lasting fascination. Today, little remains of the physical rectory. The ruins were finally demolished in 1944, and new houses eventually built near the site. Yet, the legend persists. Occasional reports still emerge of people experiencing strange phenomena in the vicinity, sudden temperature drops, unexplained sounds, or glimpses of a dark figure in peripheral vision. The story of Borley Rectory remains a fascinating case study in how ghost stories evolve and persist. It demonstrates the complex interplay between genuine unexplained phenomena, possible hoaxes, psychological factors, and the human desire to believe in something beyond the material world. Was Borley truly haunted? The answer likely depends on one's predisposition to believe in the supernatural. What's undeniable is that something unusual occurred in that Victorian mansion on a quiet country lane, whether it was the manifestation of restless spirits or the product of very human fears and desires projected onto creaking floorboards and shadows in the night. As Harry Price himself wrote in his final assessment of the case, "The rectory may be gone, but its secrets remain." Some questions about what happened there may never be answered, but the testimonies of those who experienced its phenomena firsthand cannot be easily dismissed. In the final analysis, Borley Rectory remains a mystery, a place where the veil between this world and whatever lies beyond seemed for a time remarkably thin.